Hello, my friends. It's Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. And you can't tell exactly how this works because the podcasts, they just come out when they come out. But every now and then, I had something going on. I got to work way ahead. And so I record a whole bunch in advance over the course of a few days. And so for you, it's like we hung out yesterday. This stuff's normal. For me, it's like I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. And, I kind of missed the conversation. So I'm glad we're hanging out now so that we can talk about yet another condemnatory remark from Jesus toward the religious leadership. But before we do that, I would like to tell you a quaint anecdote about myself from a couple weeks back. I went and I played some real light tennis with my daughter. And when I play with my daughter, it's a little different thing. She's learning. She's hitting the ball pretty well. Very talented girl. But it's not like playing with my buddy Rocky, who's 6'4" and all muscle and athleticism and can cover absolutely everything and is just a beast. I'm a sweaty, disastrous, rundown mess after I play against him. When I play with my daughter, I tend to be more in one place and kind of just hit the ball to different corners and help her work on different things. And so, you get a tiny little froth worked up, but not the kind of thing that like makes your gym shorts smell like old rank pumpkins where you got to go change like right this second. You're just in that in-between zone where if you get close enough, like maybe something's a little bit off. Like I didn't like what I just smelled, but I'm not sure enough to make a remark or even a face. And so I was in that zone and we got done with tennis and it took a little bit longer and then we had to go to the next thing. And the next thing was a little bit more social. I didn't have time to get fully cleaned up. And so I was like, all right, we're doing this thing. And so I grabbed my stick of men's deodorant. I think the specific scent is called Lumberjack Kraken Sea Foam Spray Paul Bunyan Beard Bear Jacket. They name those things such weird stuff now. And I was like, I'm just going to put this on real thick. And so I slathered it on there real good. And I was like, dang, that smells delicious. Like, I want to be around me now. And a second ago, I didn't as much. Again, it was minimal. It wasn't terrible. And so then I go and I hang out with these people and I just kept getting nice remarks from folks who were like, you smell really good, like a Kraken or a bear jacket or seafoam. I mean, what do you say to that? I know. And thank you very much for noticing. I got more comments that night than I have in like years for just smelling incredibly delicious. And I don't know what that actually says, but I do know this. It was a complete lie. I am a fraud. I was gross underneath it all. Like if you put your nose closer, you would have been super disappointed. I just covered up my mild uncleanness with some Vietnamese petroleum product that had some cheap perfume tossed into it. And it worked. But again, it wouldn't have taken a serious investigation to discover that that was just a front and that the reality of the situation was less pleasant. I'm glad we talked about this. Do you remember at the beginning when I was like, I missed you. It's good to be back together. We should talk. And probably you felt warm things in your heart and you were like, me too. This is good. It's why I'm here because it feels like we know each other through the long distance of the internet. And then I told you that story, and now you threw up in your mouth a tiny bit. But the point is that in the same way I could give the impression of clean, but the reality of the inside was not clean, likewise, so the Pharisees were charged by Jesus with giving the impression of clean by putting a spit shine on the outside of stuff. But if you actually look inside the thing, oh my gosh, it's really, really disgusting. And he uses the imagery of a vessel, like when your kids do the dishes and they just run a quick washcloth over the outside and you're like, that looks pretty good. And then you go to eat out of it and you're like, oh, whoa, people eat out of this. It's horrible. Do it again. Matthew 23:25. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. That sounds just like all the other woe to yous except for the one where he called them blind guides. You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Jesus' language here, when translated to the English in all of the modern translations, I feel like is understated compared to what it looks like it is in the original. And look, I try to avoid doing this. Well, if you go and look at the original language, you will see that actually what the Bible really means, and this would be hard for you because it takes a lot of training to know things like this, that what it actually means is really totally different than what it looks like it means in English. Generally speaking, the English translations just kick butt. They're phenomenal. And every time I go and do my fancy little seminary guy nitpicking thing, I discover, oh, I totally see why whoever made this decision. That's a really good rendering, and you clearly put a lot of time and thought into that. So I don't really have much judgment for these kind of things. But every now and then, I do feel like I get the impression that the committee got together, they were looking at a passage, they understood the full implications of a word and just how loaded that word was in Greek. But they're like, this is going to be a translation for like the next 10, 20, 30 years. That word is loaded and slippery at this point in history. Let's go with something that gets the point across, but that maybe doesn't have the same kind of venom. Because let's face it, a lot of the terms that you and I use for things we really don't like, they get burned out quickly. There's only so long you can use the same insult, and then the insult becomes a joke. There's only so long you can throw the same lazy pejoratives at your political enemies before they become laughable overstatements, and then you have to move on to new verbal real estate to find a new way to call them out, and then the old word that you were using to call people out has all this new baggage. So I get why these kind of translation points are tricky. That said, the word arpage in the original Greek looks like it is much weightier than just greed, which is the centerpiece of the charge that Jesus is making against these guys, greed and self-indulgence. It does mean greed, but it's like greed plus. It's associated with this impulse to steal people's stuff, to pillage, to break in and take a whole bunch of things like a reckless marauder that aren't yours. Viking-like pirates from the Mediterranean first century frantically sacking and pillaging a town would have been the imagery that was conjured for the original audience when the word arpage escaped Jesus' lips. This isn't just greed, it's steamroller greed. It's, I don't care about anybody else's need. I am unapologetically given to a lust for your stuff, no matter how much vile carnage I might leave behind me after I do it. And so what if you're on the translation committee? Like, I guess I took all those words to try to explain the connotations that I'm finding in my research. How do you sum that up into one or two simple little ideas? Well, they like to go with greed and self-indulgence. So the imagery is pretty straightforward here on the outside. Like, look at this squeaky clean piety. They know what all the S tier swears are. They know what the A plus tier swears are, the A swears, and then the B swears that they still don't do. Maybe in C tier to make a point, they could say some of those, but they've really got their swears nailed down and what's a cuss and what's not a cuss. And they totally know exactly how much they need to donate and what to wear to the gala so everybody will know they were there. And they know the polite turns of phrases and what to say and how to aw shucks a compliment that they really actually wanted to receive. They've got all the religious social sophistication nailed down, and they've gerrymandered all of their rules in such a way that they look squeaky clean with all of it. But the imagery that Jesus is drawing on is, yeah, that cup might look pretty good from the outside. Yeah, that guy at that dinner party might smell all right, but just get a little bit closer. You would not want to cuddle with that guy or eat out of that dish because it is rancid in there if you get too close to it with your face or your nose. And I don't think it's just a convenient analogy that he's drawing on here either. I think that especially in the Jewish conception of what you ingest, like that business that we get from Jesus earlier on about it's not what goes into your mouth that makes you unclean, but it's what comes out. That demonstrates an acknowledgement on his part that he's aware that this clean and unclean and very picky-unish rules about clean and unclean, that was a big deal. That was a hot-button issue for the day. That was a point of religious pride for these folks to say we would strain out that gnat so we wouldn't eat the wrong thing. And so he rolls right from talking about how important it is to them that they go letter of the law on what they ingest, and then he's saying you yourselves, simply by merit of being around people and providing religious direction, leadership, or example to them, are causing people to ingest disgusting things because you have not cleaned the inside of the cup, and all kinds of uncleanness is entering into the people who you lead in a far more perilous manner than accidentally catching a crumb here or there of something that wasn't supposed to get in your mouth. Now, these woes are ramping up and they're compounding one on top of the other, each blow hitting with all the force of the last one plus the force of the new one added to it. And I think there's some pretty obvious connections back to the Sermon on the Mount with this particular passage, but the next passage mirrors all of the same imagery. And so I think we'll go back and collect that stuff from the Sermon on the Mount and revisit that next time around as we look at the next woe. A quick note, I put out a video today about the Magi and who they were and where they fit in Persian history and legends and lore and all sorts of fun other ancient tidbits about where they fit into the story and what they meant and why they're in the Bible. And Jeff Foote wrote an awesome song for it. And I just think it's really fun. It's kind of like old school TMBH videos that I used to really love to make. And I think since we started doing this podcast a couple of years ago, a lot of the demand for the straight up Bible content on my channel has migrated over here. Because, I mean, if I do a Luke video every 6 weeks over on the YouTube channel, well, if you want the story of Jesus, this is probably the better place to hang out because you're keeping up with it. It's moving along every day way quicker. So I just haven't seen as much interest in straight up Bible stuff. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to go do some Bible dictionary, deep dive kind of things like we used to do and joke around and have fun with it. And so I made one like that. And it was fun to get back in the saddle in that way. And I suspect that if you like this podcast, you might enjoy that video as well. So it's the one on the Magi. It says pagan space wizards right there on the thumbnail, which that's language that we first used over here on the podcast. So I thought that was kind of fun as well. Hey, patrons, we got all of the Christmas cards mailed out earlier this week, so you should see those in the next day or two. Sometimes they get sent back to me if for whatever reason the address is weird or didn't work. I'm sorry. If it doesn't get there physically, please receive my warm Christmas family greeting to you from my heart instead. More woeing tomorrow. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.